as soon as you mentioned the instruments that Russians are using across the planet, across the globe, I want to remember my latest discussion with Yanis Sarts, if you maybe know him. He is the head of Stratcom in Latvia, the organization that works with disinformation, with the cybersecurity and all this stuff. So he surprised me when he told that it's a quote, the Russia is in the game again, when I asked him about who is winning the informational war right now. Because from the start, from the beginning of war in Ukraine, Ukraine showed great level and showed the great opportunity in this war. But now, Russia in the game again. So my question is, we have lots of organizations like yours, like his, different others in the world that communicate with each other, that create different instruments to counter-effect this disinformation, all this cybersecurity problems and all this stuff. But the more organization we create or open, the more Russia become powerful and getting back in game. What's the trick?
So to begin with, even though, I started on a very positive note, wishing the victory in 2024 for Ukraine, there is a tiny trick there. This war will be not won on the battlefield. This war will be won only in the perception. And Russia understands this very well. I'll answer your question in a moment, but just to give a background why we are where we are and why you're so surprised by that. Because here in the West, we do not perceive propaganda or information as a weapon. The Russian government and Russian military openly talks about information as a weapon. They also understand that kinetic to the non-kinetic measures are non-kinetic to kinetic 4-to-1. And Russian military openly claims who has information superiority will win the war. Believe them when they say it. So what's going on here in the West? You're absolutely right. There are so many new organizations and efforts to expose Russian propaganda and what they claim to counter it. But I'll have to tell you something. Oftentimes such organizations, like we work with cybersecurity experts, we follow, different patterns of messaging. We understand very well like different bots accounts and trolls accounts. We can connect the dots, but that's not enough. Writing academic articles and policy briefs is not going to help. Who is actually reading those things other than researchers? Don't get me wrong, but like my friends who are still in the Western Balkans, they don't read those things. They just fall for these narratives. My friends here in the United States, some of them believe that Ukraine is a corrupt country. And those narratives resonate with them. And I'll tell you why. Because during the Cold War, the United States was the superpower in information warfare. Let's call a spade a spade. Here in the United States, we used modern art, we used democracy, we used music, we used jazz music to win hearts and minds in Eastern Europe. Today, it's not going to work like that. I have no idea, frankly, what foreign intelligence agencies are working. If I had this information, I would not be talking to you today. But I can tell you also that we have something that is called Global Engagement Center, which is immensely important part of the US government that deals with influence operations. But what they're doing, mostly exposing narratives and propaganda coming from Iran, coming from China, coming from Russia, that's not enough. We need to go on the offensive. I'm not saying, that the West should per se target the West, with lies, or the Russians or the Russian allies, because the truth is on our side. But I'll just give you a very concrete example. I'm confident to say that you've been following what was happening between Armenia and Azerbaijan when in Nagorno-Karabakh, when Armenians had to flee the country while their friend Russia was literally watching that. It was such a great opportunity for the West to tell Russian allies, you see, if you want to be a Russian friend, this is how Russia will treat you. They will throw you under the bus. Are we spreading lies? We are not. But I'm afraid that there is another caveat over there why the West is not as successful as it should be when countering Russian propaganda in terms of going on the offensive. Some people still, fear to provoke Russia. And every time when I read like a Russian military defense media linked to the defense Ministry of Defense called Zvezda, they have this complete paranoia that the West is indeed engaged in influence operations and that the West wants to destroy Russia. And that's a red line for Moscow, at least, that's what they say. And that's why the West, in part, fears to challenge that. The second problem is that even though, I grew up broadly we call it Eastern Europe, but now, every part of Eastern Europe has its own, part. I grew up, in the Balkans. I very much also understand different ways of thinking. And the Western policymakers, they love to think through their lenses. They do not actually oftentimes understand how Russia operates in things. Having said that, for many people in the West, it's like, why should we engage, in influence operations? It's irrelevant. Let's, send just tanks and jets. But that's not how Russian strategy of hybrid warfare actually works. And if you want to counter Russia, you have to think like the Kremlin. So I have to tell you, I've been warning, and I've been, one of those people trying really to explain what are the problems in the Western way of thinking about the propaganda. The third problem is specifically here in the US, it's not a problem, but it is certainly a challenge that we genuinely believe in free speech. And Russia understands that very well. So they understand also how to weaponize the free speech here. For example, if you want to sanction or if you want to stop RT or Sputnik operating here, they are going to say, oh, you see, this decadent West and Biden, liberals, they just want to stop like a free speech. And then they target the far right groups here that fall for it. And that's why people here struggle with countering the Russian narratives.